Groom died on wedding night. What happened during the funeral shocked everyone. Harold's body hit the floor with a thud. His new wife, Charlotte, was screaming for help, barefoot in her wedding gown, gripping the hotel phone with both hands. "He's not breathing. Please, just come." By the time paramedics got there, it was too late. 32 years old. Gone. Just like that. Before we dive into this story, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It started in Savannah, Georgia. That's where Harold built his name. He wasn't rich by birth, but by flavor. A self-taught chef with a gift for Southern comfort food. Folks lined up around the block for his peach-glazed ribs and hot honey cornbread. His restaurant, Bishop's Table, had been written up in every regional magazine. Harold wasn't flashy. He wasn't skinny either. Big man, big heart. Everyone said the same thing. He was the kind of guy who remembered your birthday and your grandma's biscuit recipe. So when people heard he was getting married, and to someone like her, mouths didn't just drop. They stayed open. Charlotte Monroe, 26, slender, soft-spoken, and stunning. She moved to town to teach art at a local school, but no one ever saw her at the grocery store or in the coffee line. She lived quietly in an apartment above the old record store and kept her curtains drawn even on sunny days. They met at a food festival. Harold was doing a live demo on bourbon-glazed catfish when he noticed her in the back. Not tasting, just watching. After his set, she approached his booth and asked if he knew how to make lavender hush puppies. He laughed, said he didn't, but he'd try, if she gave him a reason. She smiled and said, "How about dinner next Friday?" From that night on, they were together. But not everyone bought it. Not in Savannah. Whispers started ear. "She's too pretty for him. She's hiding something. She ain't from here. You don't know her people." Harold didn't care. He told folks to keep their opinions like they kept their forks, out of his business. They dated for 11 months. When he proposed, it was private. No big restaurants, no fancy ring, just him, her, and a folded napkin with "Will you marry me?" stitched on it. The wedding was held in late spring under magnolia trees in a rented garden. Harold wore a navy blue suit 2 sizes too snug, and Charlotte wore ivory lace that looked like it belonged in a museum. Everyone came. Customers, cooks, teachers, even the mayor. People smiled and clapped and ate too much cobbler. But under all that joy, something strange lingered. There was the man at table 9 who said he saw Charlotte making a phone call during the reception, crying, saying something about tomorrow better be worth it. There was the best man who caught her stuffing a tiny envelope deep into her purse, only to yank her hand back when someone got too close. And there was the bridesmaid, Charlotte's only friend from out of town, who left after dinner and never came back. Still, no one said anything. That night, they checked into the honeymoon suite at the Franklin Hotel. Staff remembered them smiling, arms wrapped around each other, giggling like kids who got away with something. Just after 2 a.m., a guest in the room below heard a crash, then a scream. Harold had collapsed in the bathroom. His head hit the floor hard. Charlotte called for help, but it didn't matter. The official report said heart attack, no alcohol, no drugs, no signs of trauma, no foul play suspected. Except Terrence wasn't buying it. Terrence Bishop was Harold's older cousin, ex-military, ran a small security firm just outside town. Quiet guy, sharp eyes. He didn't cry when he got the news. He asked questions. He showed up at the hospital before the sun rose, looked at Harold's body, and something about it didn't sit right. He remembered Harold once telling him, "If anything ever happens to me, check the drawer." At the time, it seemed like a joke. Now, it echoed. So that night, while Charlotte was busy talking to the funeral home, Terrence slipped into Harold's office at the restaurant. He went straight to the bottom drawer of the desk, locked. He used a spare key Harold had hidden behind a spice jar. Inside was a small black USB. The label read, "Play only if I'm gone." And that was when Terrence knew this wasn't just a tragedy. It was a setup. Terrence didn't tell anyone about the USB, not yet. He didn't even watch it at first. He just stared at it for a while, black, silent, and waiting, like it knew something no one else did. That night, in his apartment above the office, Terrence closed the blinds, locked the door, and plugged it into his laptop. The screen lit up. It was Harold, sitting in his office chair, arms crossed, looking tired but focused. "If you're seeing this," Harold said, "I'm gone." He paused. "I need you to listen. I love Charlotte, I really do. But I've heard her whispering on the phone at night, saying things that don't sound like love." Terrence leaned forward. "She thinks I'm asleep, but I'm not. Last week she said the words payout and after the wedding, then a name. Ben, I don't know who that is." The video glitched for a second. Harold blinked. "If anything happens to me, anything weird, don't let it go. She said I changed my will. I did, but only because she asked so kindly. Too kindly. Something's off." Terrence pressed pause. His jaw clenched. He'd never liked Charlotte. She was polite, but cold, polished, but distant. Her eyes always scanned a room like she was counting exits. The next morning, Terrence drove to her old apartment, the one she lived in before moving in with Harold. The landlord still remembered her, said she always paid in cash, and didn't leave a forwarding address. But the neighbor on the second floor, a woman with rollers in her hair and a cigarette in her hand, remembered something else. "She left in a hurry, that one," the woman said. 3 years ago, maybe 4, right after her boyfriend died. Terrence froze. Boyfriend? Or fiancé. He was young, some kind of accident, but no one really knew what happened. The police came, then poof. She was gone, like smoke. Terrence didn't say a word on the drive back, just replayed Harold's words in his head. After the wedding. Policy payout. Ben. He called the funeral home and asked when the public service was happening. "Tomorrow," they said. "Open casket, 11 a.m. But something else was happening behind the scenes. Something Charlotte hadn't told anyone. That same day, while Terrence was digging into her past, Charlotte was meeting with the funeral director in private. She wanted a second memorial, invite only, no press, no speeches, just her, some flowers, and a closed-door service later in the week. When asked why, she simply said, "I need space to grieve alone." But that wasn't all. She also requested that Harold's personal effects, including his ring, his phone, and his watch, be cremated separately, not with the body, not stored, destroyed. The funeral director made a note but didn't ask questions. Terrence found out only because he called the same office an hour later to confirm the time. The secretary mentioned it by mistake. "She's planning a second event?" Terrence asked. "Oh yes," the woman replied. "Didn't she tell you?" No, she didn't. Terrence didn't sleep that night. He played the USB video again, all the way through. This time, Harold's voice sounded shakier, like he knew this might be the last time he'd speak. "I might be wrong," Harold said, almost whispering. "Maybe I'm just scared. But if I'm right, please don't let it be for nothing." Terrence packed the USB in a small envelope and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. The next morning, the church was already half full when he arrived. People whispered and hugged and cried in the corners. Charlotte stood by the casket wearing black gloves and a long veil. Her makeup was perfect. Not a single tear smudged. Terrence didn't go up to her. He stayed near the back, watching. He noticed the guest book. Most people signed their names. But one entry stood out. No name, just a single word. "Sorry." The pen stroke was shaky, like the person had been in a rush. At exactly 11 a.m. the service began. The pastor spoke about love and time and God's plan. Charlotte nodded and dabbed her eyes gently, like she was following a script. Terrence's hand brushed the envelope inside his jacket. His chest burned. He hadn't planned on doing anything today. But now, Now he wasn't sure he could stay quiet. He looked around the room. Faces, friends, family, all here to say goodbye. But the truth wasn't buried yet, and he had it in his pocket. Terrence moved before he had time to think. He stepped out of his pew and walked straight down the aisle, past rows of family and co-workers, past the flowers and framed pictures of Harold smiling over hot skillets. The pastor paused mid-sentence. Charlotte turned. Her face stiffened. Terrence reached the podium. He didn't ask for permission, just pulled the USB from his jacket, held it up, and said, "Harold left something behind." The room went still. He looked at the funeral director. "There's a projector, right?" They hesitated, then nodded. Terrence handed over the drive. A tech assistant rushed forward, plugging it in without question. The screen behind the altar lit up. Harold appeared, sitting in his office, eyes steady, voice quiet. "If you're seeing this, I'm already gone. And Charlotte, I know you lied." Gasps, real ones. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. A man said, "What the hell?" Charlotte took a step back. Her veil shifted. She looked like her skin had gone cold under the makeup. Harold's video kept playing. "You said you loved me, but I heard you. I heard everything. The phone calls. They talk about after the wedding. About the payout." Charlotte whispered something under her breath. The pastor tried to move toward the screen, but the crowd stopped him. One woman grabbed his sleeve and said, "Let it play." The video shifted. Harold had spliced in a second clip, a grainy recording from his home office security cam. The angle was off, but the audio was clear. Charlotte's voice. "He already changed his will. After the wedding night, he's mine. Just switch the pills. He won't even notice." A loud thud echoed from the speakers. Someone dropped a hymnal. Charlotte swayed. Her hands trembled. Then, in front of everyone, she fainted. Hard. Her head hit the pew. Two men rushed to catch her, but she was out cold. Still, the video kept going. Another clip. Charlotte standing in the bedroom, her back to the camera, digging through Harold's overnight bag. She found a pill bottle, shook it, then replaced it with one from her purse. Terrence turned to face the mourners. "You all asked why I looked so calm, why I didn't cry. It's because Harold warned me. And he was right." A man stood up and shouted, "Call the police!" Someone else said, "Get her out of here!" But Charlotte didn't move. Paramedics had been called. They rolled her onto a stretcher. Terrence didn't stop them. He didn't need her to speak. The video had spoken for her. An hour later, the service was over. The crowd had thinned. The police had arrived. They took the USB and asked Terrence to come with them. He told them everything. About the drawer, the video, the pills. Then he said one more thing. "She mentioned someone named Ben." The officer in charge, Detective Marla Green, frowned. "You sure?" "Posit. Saw." Marla wrote it down. "We'll run through her history, get back to you." But Terrence wasn't done. Something kept nagging at him. The name on that neighbor's lips. The ex-fiancé. The man who died and then vanished from Charlotte's life. That night, he did something crazy. He called a buddy who worked for a private database group and asked for access to any known death records linked to Charlotte Monroe. The friend hesitated. "You better have a reason." "I do," Terrence said. "A dead man just left me a message." Within an hour, he had a file. Charlotte Monroe didn't exist 5 years ago. Before that, her name was Rachel Morgan, and she had been married to Benjamin L. Hart. Died 3.5 years ago. Cause of death, unknown. Ruled natural. Terrence stared at the screen, his gut twisted. He called Detective Marla, gave her everything. She didn't sound surprised, just focused. "Meet me tomorrow," she said. "We may be opening a grave." Terrence hung up and sat in the dark. He had exposed her in front of everyone, but the story wasn't over. Because if Rachel Morgan had married Benjamin Hart and never divorced him, then Harold's marriage hadn't just been a mistake. It might not have been legal at all. Detective Marla Green didn't waste time. The moment she confirmed Rachel Morgan's marriage to Benjamin Hart, she pulled court records, hospital logs, and policy files. What she found cracked the case wide open. Charlotte Monroe had never filed for divorce. That meant her marriage to Harold was invalid from the start. But that was just the surface. The real break came when Marla requested Benjamin Hart's autopsy. There wasn't one. Ben had been declared dead, cremated within 48 hours, and buried in a family plot, under a fake name. Terrence sat in Marla's office as she laid the paperwork across her desk. She buried him as Daniel Reese. No death certificate, no medical examiner, no family present. Terrence stared at the pape, was silent. She said he died in his sleep. Heart failure. Just like Harold. Marla stood. I already filed an order for exhumation. We will dig tomorrow. The next morning, before sunrise, Terrence stood in a muddy cemetery on the edge of Savannah. Rain hadn't fallen in days, but the ground felt soft, too soft, like it had been disturbed before. The crew brought up the box. It wasn't a coffin, just a charred wooden crate. The cemetery record had said cremation, but the remains inside told a different story. There was nobody there, no bones, no urn, only a scorched men's suit, burned beyond recognition, and a handful of ashes that looked like they'd come from a fireplace, not a person. Marla looked at the emptiness, then at Terrence. She staged it. Terrence didn't speak. He couldn't. Something inside him cracked. Ben had never died. Charlotte, no, Rachel, had faked her husband's death and buried a lie. Marla ordered a full forensic scan of the site, but the answer was already clear. There was no Benjamin Hart in that ground. He'd walked away from that grave alive. Later that afternoon, Charlotte woke up in police custody. A nurse had been stationed by her hospital bed, and the moment her eyes opened, a pair of handcuffs clicked shut around her wrist. Marla walked in and sat beside her. You're not Charlotte Monroe. You're Rachel Morgan, and you were never widowed. Charlotte said nothing. Marla leaned in. Ben's not dead, is he? Still nothing. You didn't act alone. You had help. He coached you, didn't he? He told you how to dress, how to talk, who to target. Charlotte finally looked at her. You can't prove he's alive. We don't need to, Marla replied. We just need to prove you knew he wasn't. Charlotte smirked, but it was weak, hollow. In the meantime, Terrence had gone back to Harold's apartment. He hadn't been back since the wedding. The place still smelled like his cousin, spices and soap and a hint of burnt sugar. He walked into Harold's bedroom and stood there, eyes scanning the room. Then he saw it. A second phone. It was tucked beneath a pile of folded sweaters, off and dusty. But when Terrence powered it on, messages flooded the screen. Most were from an unsaved number. Unknown. You almost have him. Stay sweet. Unknown. Don't panic. You know the script. Unknown. If he changes the will, tell me right away. The last message came on the night of the wedding. Unknown. It's done. Pack light. Meet at the storage lot by 3 a.m. Terrence's stomach dropped. He brought the phone to Marla that same night. She took one look at the number and traced it back within hours. It belonged to a burner account. No name, no billing. But surveillance footage from the nearby storage lot showed someone arriving that night. A tall man, hood up, limp in his left leg. I walked with a cane. The footage was blurry, but it was enough. Marla pulled an old security video from a gas station near Charlotte's old apartment, dated 4 years back. A man pumping gas, same height, same cane. Benjamin Hart wasn't dead, and he had been there the night Harold died. The next morning, national alerts went out. Names, descriptions, partial photos. But it was too late. Both Rachel and Ben had vanished. Charlotte made bail before the charges could lock. Some technicality in the marriage laws. Her defense argued Harold had known she was married before and had accepted it. No signature on the final will update. No direct evidence she'd switched pills. Marla fought, but the system dragged. 2 weeks later, a judge let her go, pending further investigation. Terrence watched it on TV, mouth clenched, hands shaking. He'd stood in front of Harold's casket. He'd heard his cousin warn the world, and it still wasn't enough. He didn't eat for days. Then, 6 months later, he got a text. No name, no number. Just a link. It led to a wedding video posted on a small out-of-state photography blog. The location said Oklahoma. The bride wore red. The groom smiled under a trimmed beard. Terrence paused the video. It was Ben. Different hair, different names. But the limp was the same. The way he reached for the bride's waist, the tilt of his smile. He hadn't changed at all. And the woman? Not Charlotte. Someone younger, maybe mid-20s, with wide, trusting eyes and a nervous smile that didn't quite reach her cheeks. Her name wasn't mentioned in the video description, but the blog caption read, "When Sophia met David, it was love at first click." Sophia. Another new name. Another new life. Another carefully chosen target. She stood beside Ben, now David, with the same soft posture Charlotte once used, hands folded over her bouquet like she was coached. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a performance. Same body language, same softness, same controlled speech. Another mask, another Harold. Terrence downloaded the video and sent it straight to Marla. She called 5 minutes later. "Do you want to go public?" He thought about it, then said, "No, I want to make something that lasts." That's when the podcast was born. The Last Vow. Each episode, Terrence told a true story. About people who married into lies. About lovers who disappeared after insurance money cleared. About fake names and dead ends and how easy it was to fake a life if you knew which lines not to cross. He never used Charlotte's name, or Ben's, but their story lived in every word. He ended each episode with the same line. "If you're ever unsure about someone, don't wait for a funeral to find out the truth." But even that wasn't the end, because 1 year to the day after Harold's death, Terrence visited the grave with a single lily. As he placed it down, he saw something resting at the hear. De stone, a fresh bouquet of white orchids. Pinned to it was a note, folded in perfect thirds, one sentence. "He died, but the vow lives." He looked around. No footsteps, no cameras, no sign of anyone coming or going. But someone had been there, and someone wasn't done yet. Terrence didn't touch the note. He just stood there, staring at it, his hand still holding the single lily he'd brought. The orchids were fresh, not grocery stores or cheap. Someone had placed them carefully, deliberately, like it mattered, like they still believed the story wasn't over. His fingers tightened around the stem. He didn't cry. He hadn't in a long time. The grief had hardened into something else, something colder. He couldn't even name it anymore. It just lived in him, quiet and heavy, like a stone you forget you're carrying until it cracks a rib. He sat on the edge of the grave for a while, elbows on knees, the folded note staring up from the grass like it was waiting to be read again. "He died, but the vow lives." It was her handwriting. He didn't need proof. He remembered the curves of her letters from the thank you notes she once left for Harold, the way her H dipped like a hook. But this time, it wasn't a thank you. It was a warning. Or maybe a promise. He didn't take the note, didn't pocket the flowers. He just placed the lily down beside them and stood up. As he turned to leave, something pulled at him. Not fear, but something older, something like exhaustion. He had chased ghosts for a year, told stories, exposed frauds, lit fires under broken marriages, but none of it had brought Harold back. None of it had stopped her. Ben was still out there. She was still out there. And now she knew he hadn't walked away. And somewhere, maybe just a state line away, Sophia had no idea she was sleeping next to a man who once buried himself alive to stay invisible. Terrence didn't know her face, but he could already picture the look she might wear when the next accident happened. Wide-eyed, trembling, innocent. Another carefully written obituary waiting to happen. Terrence didn't speak to anyone that day, didn't record a podcast, didn't file a report. He went home, sat on the floor of his living room, and stared at the wall for hours. He thought about the look on Harold's face in that video, the quiet panic behind his words, the fear of loving someone you don't fully understand, of trusting a smile that hides a countdown. And for the first time, Terrence let himself ask the question he'd buried all year. What if Harold knew exactly who she was, and still loved her anyway? What if the real betrayal wasn't her lies, but his silence? He let that question sit, let it echo without chasing an answer. That night, he updated the podcast description with one new line. Sometimes the dead don't want justice. They just want to be remembered. A week after visiting Harold's grave, Terrence stood in his hallway, holding the wedding photo in both hands, the one with Harold smiling wide and Rachel, leaning into him like it was forever. He didn't smash it. He didn't frame it again either. He wrapped it gently in an old t-shirt and stored it in a box labeled Bishop. It joined a folder of funeral programs, an unused cufflink, and the USB that started it all. He didn't keep those things to remember the lie. He kept them to remember the man. Harold hadn't been perfect, but he had been good. The kind of good that made people feel full, even after the meal ended. Terrence had stopped chasing Rachel after that last anonymous call. Someone said she was in New Mexico now, using a new name. Another wedding, another man. He didn't follow up, because it wasn't about catching her anymore. He'd started the podcast to expose a crime, but by the end, it had become something else. A place where people came to grieve what they never saw coming. Every week, new listeners sent in messages. He reminded me of my father. She could have been my sister. I almost married someone just like her. And every time Terrence read those words, he felt something shift. Not closure, but clarity. The world wasn't short on predators, but it was starving for people who paid attention. On the next anniversary of Harold's death, Terrence lit a single candle on his porch. Not inside, not hidden. He watched the flame dance for a while. Then he saw it. A pair of white orchids resting at the edge of the walkway. No footsteps. No note, just the flowers. But this time, something else lay beneath them. A wedding invitation. Handwritten. No return address. Just a name. Mr. and Mrs. D. Hall. And a date. Terrence didn't know the bride, but he knew the handwriting. He didn't pick them up. He didn't look around. He just whispered, "I see you," and walked back inside. Some ghosts don't want revenge. They just want to be remembered. And some vows never really end. If this story made you feel something, share it, subscribe, and stay with us. We tell the stories others bury. You just heard one of them. Thanks for watching.